Hello, for those of you that are already logged on, this is the Cypress County Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw virtual information session. We're going to give it a couple of minutes here to let more people log on before we get started. So bear with us for a couple minutes. I can see that a few more people have logged on. We'll give it another minute or two to let people have the chance to log on before we get started with the presentation. Okay, well, we will get started now and hopefully a few more people join us in the next couple of minutes. Good evening and welcome to the Cypress County Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw Review and Update Virtual Information Session. My name is Elisa Stamatakis and I am a planner with V3 Companies of Canada. Joining me is Peter Vanna, Senior Planner and Project Manager at V3, who will be delivering the presentation tonight. One item to note before I turn it over to Peter is that this event is being recorded, and our intent is to publish the recording and make it available on the county's website in the coming days. All participants' cameras and microphones are turned off, so you will not form part of the recording. And with that, Peter, you are good to take it away.
Good evening, everybody. And welcome to the Cypress County Municipal Development Plan and Land Use Bylaw Review. What we hope to do this evening is to have an overview of what the project is about and talk a little bit about the background of what a municipal development plan is, what a land use bylaw is, how it fits into the various forms of legislation, and what our process will be from here. Well, let's start off by taking a look at what we call the scope and what the process is for the review. And really, what do we hope to achieve from this? So our project goals as far as reviewing both the municipal development plan and the land use bylaw is to come up with ways to improve both documents so that we have more clarity and consistency in terms of how they're interpreted, how the reader reads the documents, and how the public really understands what the messaging is from both the municipal development plan perspective and the land use bylaw. As part of this process, we will be engaging the public at various points. So this evening is the first of a number that are coming your way this week. So this is the virtual information piece, and there will be also public open houses or sessions that we'll be hosting later on this week. So one of the purposes of doing this is really to make user-friendly documents that people can understand. It's not really cumbersome or, as they say, planning jargon where people don't quite understand what the long-term vision for the county is or what the rules and regulations are relative to the land use bylaw. We also want to make sure that as we're going through this process that we're up to date with the changes that have occurred in the provincial legislation, as well as the council policies and the other plans that have been approved by the county over the recent past. So some of you may know that the county already has a municipal development plan and a land use bylaw. So the question becomes, so why are we amending them? Why are we amending them now? So some of the benefits to updating your municipal development plan is that because municipal development plan is a living document, it's important to update your vision of where you want the municipality to be over the next 20 years or so. And so that's really one of the first things that we want to do as far as the municipal development plan is concerned. We also want to make sure that we're reviewing the policies that are in the plan and making sure that they're up to date or they're in line with the policies that council has formed and has passed with other planning documents or other strategic documents. We also want to make sure that we're identifying what the current economic and social trends are and how we want to invest back into the county in terms of whether it's social infrastructure or physical infrastructure, and make sure that we are preparing the county for the long term. When it comes to the land use bylaw, one of the important things that, and as the land use bylaw is sometimes referred to as the zoning bylaw, we want to provide certainty when it comes to land uses and what land uses are permitted on property, as well as what kind of development can we hope to see in particular districts. So what this does is it provides certainty to landowners, provides certainty to the public in terms of what the rules are and how those rules get applied. It also looks at things such as environmental features and wildlife areas to ensure that the policies are there to ensure that we're protecting those particular areas. And the other thing, and probably what most people recognize when it comes to a land use bylaw, is that it is really there to try and implement the municipal development plan and ensure that we don't have, conflicting land uses that are next to one another. So, example of that might be confined feeding operation next to country residential. So when you're doing your zoning, to make sure that you're not having those kind of conflicting impacts next to one another. So let's take a look at the process that we'll be following. So we've already begun the process of the baseline research and analysis. So this is where we look at the various documents that the county has provided us, existing land use plans, existing master plans, policies, planning documents that relate to their neighbors or in terms of how they do intermunicipal planning and so forth. The other part that's happening at the same time is that we are starting the public and stakeholder engagement process. And as I mentioned, that'll begins with this session and carries forward with the open sessions that are later on in the week, where the public can come and help us answer some questions in terms of the municipal development plan and the land use bylaw. At the same time, as we collect that information, we then begin the writing of the municipal development plan and land use bylaw with the comments that we've received and the information that we've gathered. So we'll do that in June and July, and then we'll bring it back to the public to say, here's what we've heard, here's how we've applied it, tell us what your thoughts are on the drafted documents. Those drafted documents will then go to council in terms of taking the comments that we receive at the public feedback session in step 4, and we apply them into the draft documents which go to council. Municipal development plan and the land use bylaw are both bylaws that are adopted by council, and so they'll go through a formal adoption process of 3 readings and a public hearing, and that'll finish the process off for the review of the 2 documents. I guess one of the important things to ask is, as part of this process, is why are we doing it? Why does planning really matter? I think an important part of that is that planning documents such as the municipal development plan really help to shape Cypress County over the next 20 or so years. We call that placemaking. How is our community going to look Where do buildings go? How are the hamlets going to redevelop or develop or not develop? What's the quality of life that we as residents in the county want to have? And how do we create a livable county? So these are all things that get incorporated into planning. It also helps to look at the types of services that the county provides and what residents are desirous of having in terms of services. And it also looks at things such as takes into consideration, population growth or population decline, economic trends that are happening, and new technologies that may be coming in, such as, whether it's internet or other technologies that might be happening. And also in terms of things like how do we move around in the county? How do we protect our natural environment in the county and so forth. The other important part of reviewing any document like these documents are that it's a public engaging process. So we have these broken out into different steps, whereby the initial one is to inform the public. Here's what the documents say. Tell us what your thoughts are in terms of the kind of vision. Second step is reviewing and getting your feedback on, did we get it right? Third part is where you have your say in front of council at the public hearings. And so those are really important steps for the public to get engaged, to look at the goals and the strategies that are being proposed for the future of Cypress County and how it hopes to be implemented. And so part of the implementation is identifying, what kind of targets or measures do we want to have that make sure that the plan and the land use bylaw are doing what they said they were meant to do. The other thing that Municipal Development Plan in particular looks at, and most people may not realize this, is that municipalities are really in the quality of life business. And what I mean by that is that, when you look at different companies, it might be a Sony or a Ford or, different companies, they typically, they make cars or they make electronics or so forth, or if it's a grocery store, they sell groceries. Municipalities, on the other hand, offer a whole array of services. So that might be, particular for a county, one of the important services they provide are roads, being able to get around the county. Other things are municipal buildings, park spaces, the frequency of how your roads get graded or maintained and so forth. So that those services equals really the quality of life that you can expect to have now and into the future. And then how do we pay for that? So we pay for that through taxes and utility rates and fee charges and so forth. So really that's what we mean by that. And so it's really important to kind of look at this equation in the long term. And that's one of the things that the Municipal Development Plan does, is it looks at these things in the long term to make sure that going forward, we can maintain these services and or change the services to improve our quality of life in the future, now and into the future. So in looking at the Municipal Development Plan and the Land Use Bylaw, it's kind of important to understand sort of how do they fit and why are they required and who's saying we have to do them and that type of thing. So really that's what we call the enabling legislation. And so the most important document for most municipalities is the Municipal Government Act. And so the Municipal Government Act, particularly in this part 17, looks at planning and development specifically. So those are the rules about what an MDP is, what goes into an MDP, what goes into a land use bylaw, what has to be in a land use bylaw, so forth. But there are other pieces of legislation that also do impact the MDP, such as the Land Stewardship Act and the regulations that happen there. Things like Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act, Historic Resources, the Regional Plan, the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan, and the Land Use Framework that impact the Municipal Development Plan. So it's important to understand that, behind this is legislation that is driving how it looks and how it rolls out. Other things that the enabling legislation does is that it really identifies what the province's interests are. So, and really what provincial policies need to be followed and incorporated into the documents. So a good example of that is regional growth strategies or regional growth management plans that the province has set out. In this particular area, the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan is the regional document that really, from a regional perspective, all that river basin for the South Saskatchewan River, it really drives the policies that end up being in the Municipal Development Plan. And also, you probably were involved in the intermunicipal planning that has occurred or was required by all municipalities in the province. And so that was another piece of enabling legislation that affected Cypress County. And as a result, there are joint plans with Medicine Hat and the surrounding counties around the county. And it also stipulates, as I mentioned, what goes into the document. So what goes into municipal development plans, what goes into the land use bylaw, those are all stipulated in the enabling legislation. I'll give you an idea of how it shapes up in terms of a hierarchy. At the very top, you end up with the acts and the regulations that the province enacts. Then you end up with the land use framework and the regional plans that are the next layer down. Then you have the intermunicipal development plans that are the next layer down. And the municipal development plan then has to conform or be in line with these others that are above it. And area structure plans, which are plans that are done at a more localized level, then have to conform to the municipal development plan. And then you get the land use bylaw, which really is, as I mentioned earlier, is the piece of bylaw that really helps to fulfill or ensures that the municipal development plan gets followed in terms of the long-term vision by zones and regulations and so forth. So let's take a look at some of the components that are in a municipal development plan that really help to shape it. So as I mentioned, public engagement is a big piece that helps to drive what the future and the vision is. We have the intermunicipal development plans. We have the provincial acts and regulations. We have the area structure plans. We have council's strategic plan and the policies that council passes. And then we have the master plans and studies and standards. So that might be, what are the engineering standards for the county roads or the county water and sewer systems and so forth. When we look at the content of what actually a typical municipal development plan looks like, it usually begins by a regional context statement that really defines what is Cypress County's role within the larger region. What's the population trends look like for Cypress County moving into the future? Do we see this as a county that's going to be growing? Where does growth occur? Is it going to grow? Is it going to happen in certain hamlets? Is it going to have more country residential? How's that going to look? And where is it going to go? Also looks at economic development factors. Where industry, what kind of industries are we trying to attract? What kind of employment base are we going to have? Is that going to change? Also looks at some of the social demands that the community has and what are the future needs for the community, as well as things like parks and recreation, transportation and infrastructure. And because we're dealing with Cypress County as a rural county, agriculture is a really key important part when it comes to looking at production and protection of agriculture as a primary land use in the municipal development plan. Also looking at hazard lands and environmentally sensitive areas to ensure that those areas get protected. And finally, municipal development plan has, how are we going to implement it? How are you going to make sure that 20 years from now you can look back and say, yes, we had the right policies, we had the right vision in place, and we've actually been able to achieve it. And we are able to monitor it on a yearly basis to make sure that we're on the right track. And if we need to change, then we can adjust it accordingly. So in terms of how it gets implemented, there's really three key players when it comes to looking at a municipal development plan and how it gets implemented. The first is council. Well, council sets the priorities. Council makes the decision when it comes to adopting the plan. Council approves annual budgets that help really facilitate growth and the priorities in the plan that are identified in terms of where growth is going to happen, what kind of services we want to get into, and so forth. How are we going to work with our regional partners and our local partners to make the vision happen? From the administrative perspective, administration role is really to monitor the plan, make sure that the policies are being followed, they're being measured. We set targets and we report back to council so that council has a really good feel for, is the development plan being followed, or is it something that just simply is sitting on a shelf? And the way you do that is you implement it on an annual basis as part of your priorities, as well as the annual budgeting process. And you'll look at things like your land use bylaw and the policies, land use policies that you may create in terms of implementing it. And of course, you have to review it on a regular basis to make sure it remains relevant. And then there's the part on the community. So it's important that the community understand what the land use or what the municipal development plan is and the land use bylaw are, understand what the priorities of council are, follow and make sure that the plan is being followed, that we're reducing the impacts of conflicting land uses, giving that feedback to council and administration so that they can make adjustments to the plan as they're needed. Well, let's take a look at the land use bylaw and the purpose for the land use bylaw. So really, as I mentioned, it is about implementing the goals, objectives, and policies that are in the municipal development plan. And how do they do that? They do that through districts. They do that through regulation. And what are the rules to follow when it comes to land uses, where those land uses are located, and how development is going to occur in Cypress County. It also needs to make sure that whatever rules are in the land use bylaw are consistent, they're clear, they're understandable, and they create certainty when it comes to development happen in the county, as well as residents have a comfort that they understand what the rules are, they know how they're being applied in their neighborhood or around them. And so that also applies then to administration and council, that they understand what the rules are, it's clear, and it's consistent in terms of the decision making that happens when development proposals come forward. And as I mentioned, it's really important that the land use bylaw really helps to mitigate. A good land use bylaw should mitigate the impacts of conflicting land uses. When it comes to the land use bylaw, it's always a difficult balancing act, right? How are the rules and how are they being applied? Are the rules too strict? Do we have too many rules? Do we not have any rules? So part of this process is we're going to go through it as part of the public process. We're going to get your feedback and we're going to listen to you in terms of, where's the balance? Do you feel that it is the right balance? What needs to change in order to help with the balance? One important thing is we may not please everyone, but the closer we can get to having, that pendulum in the middle, then that helps control development and reduce land use conflicts in the county. So some of the main components that you'll find in a land use bylaw, there's really 5 main pieces. There's the duties and responsibilities of those that administer the land use bylaw. So that might be your development officer, your development authority, your municipal planning commission, your subdivision and development appeal board. So what are their roles? What are their responsibilities? And then you look at the process. What's the process for development? When do these administrative responsibilities kick in and what's their roles as part of that process? Is the process clear and is it straightforward? And is there the right of appeal on, and when do I have the right to appeal a decision on a land use? Then we end up with specific land use regulations. So that might be for a specific use. So one common one might be for campgrounds. So you may want some specific rules that relate around campgrounds that are specific to that particular use. And so it's over and above what you might find is in the specific land use districts. The specific land use districts are typical of agriculture, residential, country residential. You typically have them for the hamlet. You typically have them for parks and recreation, commercial, industrial. So those are your typical specific districts, they call them, or in other municipalities, they call them zoning districts. So, and then what you have is definitions. So definitions help to make sure that everybody understands when we say a single detached dwelling is this, everybody understands the definition. Here's what it is as an example. So where do we go from here? Well, the ways that you can get involved in this process is, first of all, visit the page, cypresscountyab.ca, and the project, the Land Use Bylaw, Municipal Development Plan, and Land Use Bylaw Review. On there, what you'll find is the information, background information, that will help you, give you an understanding of what the project is, what a municipal development plan is, what a land use bylaw is, what the process is, etc. There will also be a virtual survey that will be available online, or we'll have printed copies at the county office or at the open sessions that we have. So simply fill out those surveys, provide us with your feedback, and that will help us to have a better document. You can also attend the in-person engagement sessions, as I mentioned earlier, and they'll be held June 17th and 18th. And they're by registration. So if you want to attend those particular sessions, please contact Kayleen Simpson to register for those particular sessions. And we also, at any time, please submit your comments in terms of what you think should be changed in the municipal development plan or improved in the municipal development plan or the land use bylaw. And you can also provide that to Kayleen as well. And then provide feedback on the drafts when they come out. And that'll be late July, early August. So look forward to those particular items. So just to review the process and where we go from here, as I mentioned, we're doing the background research and analysis right now. We're holding the public stakeholder engagement sessions this week to kick things off. We'll be then doing the drafts in June and July, developing those drafts based on the input that we receive. Then we'll present those back out to the public and to stakeholders, where we'll listen to your feedback, make the changes that need to be made to the MDP and the land use bylaw in August. And then those drafts will then be presented to council as bylaws, ready for the public hearing, where you're once again will have an opportunity to speak to council and make your comments to council before council gives 3 readings to the bylaws and adopts them. Well, thank you very much for attending the session. We really appreciate you getting involved as part of this process, and we look to hopefully see you at the public meetings that are coming up. So thank you.